Hello again, this is another CSS tutorial for AHSS3080, Guelph-Humber second year web design course. This is just to introduce you to the elements that we will be using in the resume CSS assignment. There's another video coming. Again, this one's just to introduce you and get everybody up to the same pace. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments below. And if you know the answer to any questions, please answer them and help out the other people in the class here. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you a file to download. So it's just typical HTML elements that you already know that we did in the last assignment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that HTML file, add a CSS file to it, and make it look something like this. So to start off, head to nickfarnell.ca/basicelements.zip. B and E in basic and elements are capital. Once you go there, it will download a HTML file for you, and just extract this to your desktop. Oops, there we go. Okay, so now I have the basic elements HTML file. This is our starting point. The reason I'm giving this to you as a download is just so you don't have to retype every single HTML element. First thing we want to do is create a new folder on your desktop and call it styled elements. You'll notice that anytime I make a folder or a new file name, there's no spaces in any of the file names. It just keeps it easier and cleaner when you're trying to navigate to and link to different files. So once you have that folder created, drag this into that new folder. So in the styled elements folder, all you have is the basic elements HTML file. Open this up in Dreamweaver. I have an older version of Dreamweaver, but it's all the same. So in the code view, quick recap, it's just the tags that we're already familiar with: H1 tags, paragraph, H2, some ordered and unordered lists, line breaks, and paragraph tags. What we're going to do to that is add some style to it and use all the elements that you'll need to use for the resume assignment. The way we're going to do that, back in Dreamweaver, create a new file, file new, and it's going to be a CSS file. Create that. We're going to save this as style.css right away. But make sure that it's in the exact same folder as the HTML file that we saved. So we create a new folder previously called styled elements, and we're going to save this CSS file as style.css. So in that folder, we should have two different files now: basic elements.html and a blank style.css file. Notice that in this case, the style is just all lowercase letters, and basic elements has capital B, capital E. Back in Dreamweaver, we will start writing the styles, and what we're going to do first is just add some style to the H1 tag. To do that, you can add style to any existing HTML elements like H1s, paragraphs, H2s, body tags. We're also going to create our own divs later on, but to start off we're just going to apply styles to H1 tags. So to start off, H1, curly brace. Before I go too much farther, I'm going to make the font a little bit larger to see it easier. A little bit easier to see on the screen. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the color and font family of the H1 tag. To do that, just start typing in the word color with the American spelling, and I'm going to make it a dark gray color. Remember to add a semicolon at the end of each line, otherwise the styles won't apply properly. I'm also going to change the font family just to Verdana. And that line, save it by Control S or File, Save. The next thing I want to do is, we haven't tied it into the HTML file yet, so the HTML file doesn't even know that the CSS file exists. Because they're not connected, the styles won't be applied to anything inside the HTML file. To connect these two files, we're going to put some extra information within the head tag. So after this starts, but before this head tag ends, I'm going to put it right after the title. Press enter, and to do that, just like in class, I'm going to type link equal relation. It's a style sheet, href style.css. So this part is really important. This has to absolutely be the exact same as the file name that we just created. If you have a capital S in your style.css, there has to be a capital S here, otherwise it won't recognize it. The type is text CSS, and the media is screen. Close that off, save it, Control S, and then let's preview this. So if I've done everything right, we should see a change to the H1 tag here, because what we did was add some style to the H1 tag in the style.css file. Back to the HTML file, I'm going to preview it, and there we go. So you'll notice the two changes. The font style has changed, so the font face has changed to Verdana, and the color has changed as well. Back in the CSS file, let's add some other styles. The H2 tags, in this case what I'm going to do is add a background color. This will be the color behind the font. And that line, I'm going to change the color of the font itself to maybe something yellow. And I'm also going to change the font family to Verdana. Save this, Control S, then back into the HTML file, preview it again, and you can see that the H2 element that we just added style to, there's been some changes to it. Next up, let's add some information or some style to the paragraph tags. Curly brace, and we'll change the color to maybe a blue. Refresh this page, and you can see that all the paragraph tags have changed. If we look back to the basic elements.html, where that last change happened was anytime there was a paragraph tag. So here, here, and up here. So we've applied 3 different styles now. Next we're going to create our own tag and apply some specific changes to that. So if we look at sort of the finished version of what we're working towards, so far we've done the H1 tag, we've done this piece here, we've changed the color of the paragraphs. Next what we're going to try to do is make these beige boxes with a border around them. To do that, first we have to sort of define where we want those elements to come into play. And to start out, I'm going to do it right here around the unordered lists and the ordered lists. To do that, I'm going to create a div tag. So really similar to the other ways that we've done HTML elements. And then I'm going to close the div tag down here. So all of this is going to be inside that div. A div, you can think of a div as a container of different HTML elements. So what do we want to do to that div? First we have to define it. So we'll call this container. But right away we have a little bit of an issue. So with these previous elements, they already exist in HTML, so the browser recognizes what they are, but because container doesn't exist, we have to add a period to start, because we're creating our own div tag. In that container, we're going to change the background color. As well as the border. So an easy way to change the border, you can actually just type thin, black, solid, and that will give you a thin, black, solid border. Save that. Nothing's going to happen yet because this doesn't actually exist in the HTML file yet. The div exists, but it doesn't know which div it's looking for. So inside that, we have to define the class, and the class is container. It has to be spelled the exact same way with the same upper and lower case as we had in the style file here. To give myself a little bit more information about what this is, I'm going to put a comment in here that says start of container div, and then down at the bottom here I'm going to put another comment where it ends and say end of container div. You'll notice that I tabbed all of this over. It's just an easy way to recognize that all of this content lives between this div here. Let's save that. Take a look at what we're working on in the browser. If I refresh that, worked out perfectly. So we have this container div wrapping this element. Next up, we're going to try to get it to this endpoint here. So we're also going to wrap that same container div around this piece here, as well as this paragraph piece here. So we still have to do this and this. This is the one we're working on right now. If we go back to the HTML file, after this line break, we want to put div around here. So we can just start writing div, class that we've already defined is container. Give myself a little comment here saying start of container div, and then at the bottom we have to close the div and leave a comment here saying end of container div. Space it out a little bit and highlight this, press tab to tab it over, save it, and then when we refresh the page here, we've added the same container div to that section. Next, we're going to do it for the bottom piece here. Let's add a line break at the underneath what we just did there. We can actually just copy this and paste that to save some time, and we're going to wrap a div from here to here. Same container div again. Give myself a comment. Close the div down here. Another comment. And tab all of this over to keep it nice and clean. Save that, preview it, and then we're good to go. So flipping back to what we're trying to get to, we've successfully done the tag up here. We've added some information to the h2 tag, and then we've wrapped our own div containers around these three pieces of content. Still have a way to go. Everything is taking up the entire page. There's no background and there's no overall container, which is what we'll do next. Let's call this overall container overall. Try to make a little bit of sense. What we want to define now is the width of this overall container. So what we're trying to do is create a giant div that everything you see here will fit into, and then we'll define the width of it and where it sits in the page. So to do that, back in the CSS file, we'll create a div called overall. Again, remember, because it's a new one that we're creating, not an existing HTML element, you need a period to start. And the first thing that we're going to define is the width. We'll start typing width, and we'll say it's 960 pixels wide. Pixels are the way you measure on-screen sizes, and the short form is just px. So we'll save that to start. Back in the HTML file, that overall div that we just created, the overall sort of container, doesn't exist yet. So what we want to do is we want to wrap every single piece of content that we've done within the body tag, though, to accept the styles of that div. So right after the body tag, we're going to type div class equals overall as the one we just created. Leave myself a comment here saying this is the start of overall div, and we're going to wrap it around the whole thing, so it should end right before the end of the body tag. Close that, leave a comment, end of overall div. Highlight everything in between, so right up to here. Oops. Everything in between, press tab to tab it over. So now there's a nice space. You can easily see where everything is. And if we press save and preview it, we've changed the overall width. Next, what we want to do is center it in the page, and to do that, we're going to change the margin of it. Back to the style.css. Before we do that, let's add a border to it. I'll just do another thin, black, solid border. Take a look at it, so now we know exactly where that div exists and where that border is. You'll notice that everything is sort of rammed up to the edges, but we'll fix that later. Next, what we want to do is center that div on the screen, and to do that we're going to adjust the margins. We're going to adjust the margin left. You could use an actual number, but in this case we're just going to set it to automatic on each side so it centers it. So margin left equals auto. Remember that semicolon. We're going to do the same on the right. Margin right is auto. Save it, refresh it, and we've centered the div on the page. Next, because everything is rammed up against the edge, we want to add some padding. So margin, think of the margin as adding space to the outside of the div, and think of padding as adding space to the inside of the div. So if we just type padding at 10 pixels, what this will do is it'll add a 10 pixel gap on the inside of the div. Save it, and you can see we've added 10 pixels all the way around by doing that style. So this is where we are. This is where we're trying to get to. We're getting pretty close. The biggest difference in the final one is adding that background stripe. And to do that, we're going to add a repeating background image. So think of a repeating background image of ceramic tile floor. Each tile looks the exact same, but then when they're all tiled together in a large space, they're repeated vertically and horizontally. They create another larger image. To do that, there's an easy website called stripegenerator.com where you can adjust these tiled backgrounds. So what I'm going to do is change it to sort of a gray color, maybe something like that. Refresh it, that looks good. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. And once I download it, oops, close that color window. Then once I download it, I'm going to rename it just because this is a ridiculously long file name. You can see all it is a really tiny tile of a background. I'm going to call this stripe, and then right away what I'm going to do is move it to the styled elements folder on my desktop. So just to confirm what I've done there, the styled elements folder that both the CSS and the HTML file are in, I've also added the stripe background. Everything has to be in the same folder when we're working with files like this, otherwise the HTML file won't be able to find the other elements. So now we have elements, the basic elements HTML file, the CSS style file, and the stripe background image file, which is a PNG file. Back into Dreamweaver and the CSS file, I'm going to add that background image, and I'm going to put it on the body tag. So if we take a look at the HTML file, body is sort of the highest element that'll show on the browser. It starts there, ends there, and what we're going to do is we're going to add style to this body tag. Because this body tag already exists in HTML, we don't need to add a period to start. Just type in body, curly brace, and we're going to define the background image, and you should be able to browse to it. Stripe, or you can just type it in, so background-image URL bracket stripe.png. Again, this has to be the exact same file name that you called the background image when you downloaded it. If we save this and then view our file that we're working on in the browser, when we refresh it, you can see that this tiny little image has just been repeated up and down and sideways and takes up the entire background. The reason for a tiled background is it can fill the entire space without being a large file size. So when the browser has to download this to display it, it only has to download a tiny little square, but it visually takes up the entire page. There is one issue here though, because we have a gray background, it's sort of bleeding into the background of this overall div container that we did. So the easy fix is just to change the background color of this container div. Overall div. In Dreamweaver, let's just make sure that the HTML element that we have, this larger overall div, is what we're going to go edit. So we can go into the style.css file, and then in overall, we're going to define the background color as white. Save it. Refresh the page here. And there, we're good to go. So if you have any questions or comments, please add them in the YouTube comments below. And if you know how to answer any of those comments and you're flipping through, please help out other people in the class by answering them. There will be another YouTube video coming to go into deeper detail about how to add elements to the resume. So the reason I wanted to do this is because everybody's resume is a little bit different. The next resume video is going to be pretty generic, pretty overall, but this video that we're watching right here goes through the exact elements, and you can modify them to add to the Dreamweaver, or sorry, the resume file. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you soon.